Was anyone here in the session yesterday in the pre-day? All right, we're going to have a little bit of review for you folks, so I just want to be quite honest. It's basically 8 hours of deployment into 1 hour. So it's the fast track way of doing things. So my name is Jeff Medford, and I work in the Office 365 team and at Microsoft, and I focus on deployment from all of the service perspective. So when we think about what's going on with Office 365 right now, we see a tremendous amount of momentum. Externally, we always put it in our quarterly reports. Internally, we think about it day in and day out. And the fact of the matter is we have so many customers purchasing Office 365 that it is mind-blowing, and we are working very hard to deploy those customers. But I'll be really quite honest and tell you there is a hockey stick going on as far as momentum, and that from a deployment perspective, we are just trying to crank away and get those customers on board. Because from a value perspective, from what customers experience with Office 365, if it's simply in your licensing program, you're not gaining any value from it. So from our perspective, my team, and we are the deploy, adopt, and readiness team, it's really all we think about. And it's customer, direct to partner, direct to our consulting services at Microsoft. Our message from a deployment perspective has to be very simple and very clear, because it's customers can come from anywhere, but the message really has to remain the same. And I think some of the feedback I got from yesterday's pre-day was all of this seemed a little bit too one-size-fits-all. And my comment to that, just to kind of pre-up in this session to pre-talk about it, is the message is clear. The message is start simple, move to complex. Start as simple as you can. Start moving to complex as the business requires. And it doesn't matter how big or how small our customers are, that messaging from Microsoft has to be very clear. Start small and move from there and move into the cloud. And the reason we say that, and the reason, I'll try not to hide behind this too much, I'll come out here. The reason that we are very, very adamant about that is because our customers across the last 5 or 6 years, they've all had vastly different experiences with deployment. They've all had different ways, different methodologies. Do I do this first? Do I do that first? TechNet is 1,000 articles that tell you very deep about the service, but there was no kind of step-by-step guidance for our customers. And there was no positioning from Microsoft saying, this is how you do it. We had a document, and anyone know what the MODG is? MODG? Was the Microsoft Online Deployment Guide. It was 122 pages, and it told you everything you could possibly do during a deployment, but it never told you the first step. So that's one of the things we've really tried to focus on in the last 2 years or so, is bringing together guidance, process, the things we've learned with our customers to try to get them on board in a very predictable fashion, no matter where they're coming from. So that's really those are the things that I think about all the time, that I work with our customers and partners on, and that we try to build tools and programs and methodologies around. So the start of that is called Fast Track. And Fast Track's just a name because you have to have a name sometimes when you're talking about a specific way of doing things. And when we talk to our Microsoft field sales and our salespeople and our partners about this shift to a cloud-first deployment methodology, we gave it a name to try to help people understand that if you're doing it through this direction, Fast Track, if you're stepping through these steps, utilizing these tools, that you'll have a predictable experience. And so the main message out of Office 365 deployment is there really is one way to deploy. There's a million different things you can do during deployment, but there's one way Microsoft is recommending for you to deploy, and it's to start simple, move to complex. What we've seen in the past is a lot of organizations that might spend 1 or 2 years trying to remediate their Active Directory in a big project, or maybe trying to implement that new Exchange technology or topology so they can get to the cloud, and they weren't ever experiencing Office 365. It was still theoretical to customers who had purchased and not yet deployed. And so really what we're trying to talk to everybody about is start small, experience the service. The service is there for you. It's waiting. We've already built it. We spend billions of dollars a year making sure it's running and that it has capacity for every single one of our customers. So please start with the service first. Think about it in a very cloud-first way, because getting to Office 365 will take those hard discussions. It'll take the network analyzing. It'll take the mailbox analyzing. But Office 365 is waiting, and it's available to you today. And so it starts with a pilot and really thinking about what a pilot can deliver. And from a Microsoft standpoint, we see a pilot being able to deliver actual value, even though you haven't done infrastructure. The service is there. It's waiting for you. Your infrastructure hasn't been changed yet, and you can actually experience some of the things that Office 365 delivers. Maybe it's OneDrive for Business. Maybe it's SharePoint. Maybe it's just seeing all of those cool new features in the keynote with an empty mailbox to say, is this something that we're going to move forward? How do we train our users? How do we get people ready for this kind of change? So that exists, and that is how the service runs, and you can immediately start to see some of those things if you are piloting the service, if you're on the service trying to see what deployment looks like. So it's trying to take the theoretical out of what Office 365 is all about. So we move from pilot into deploy, and deploy is where you've kind of made those decisions. You have some work to do. We have a step-by-step guidance that basically says, do these things in this order. And some of them might be more difficult than others, but do them in this order, and you will always be able to move from pilot into production, and you'll always be able to move from production into advanced scenarios, which would be the enhanced side. So it seems very simple and very one-size-fits-all, but really from a messaging perspective, it's the Microsoft scope of work to our customers that says, when you're in pilot, you can use a web client, you can download Click to Run, but we're not asking you to do a full IT implementation of Office. You can do things like connected mailbox connections to POP or IMAP or to your Exchange server that's currently on premises. You can start to feel and change and work without changing your infrastructure. This is a cloud service. People come on board every day. It's waiting for you. So when we think about the scope of work from Microsoft is, you can pilot in hours, and we know that a pilot usually lasts 30 days, 60 days, however long it is that you need to really think about from a business side or trying to push this in from IT to business. So we're flexible with that. But you can be started in minutes. You can be started in hours, and then it takes the work to go through a pilot, get your success criteria, really start to look at what this does for you. But then the next step is when you are going to move to production, what are some of the things that Microsoft is going to guide you through? What are the tools that we will make available? What are some of the pieces that we will put into our products to help that cloud move? And that's really where step 2 comes into play, because step 2 says you're going to have a shared namespace. You're going to have simple coexistence. You're going to be able to do external sites, and it's going to be able to be deployed in days, which I know sounds a little crazy, but the fact of the matter is we are seeing customers who typically in the past, when we look at the size and how we've been involved with them, may take 12 to 18 weeks to reach their first mailbox on the service. That's just a fact of how it used to be. The last 6 or 7 years of Microsoft helping through partner, helping through our own consulting services, we know that it takes customers planning, prepare, and then you prepare to plan, and then you plan a little more, and then you prepare a little more, and it takes weeks and it takes time to get the first mailbox on the service. And what Microsoft's saying is, if you're following step 2, if you're following the methodology, what we see is about 3.7, 3.9 weeks, 4.1 weeks for our customers, some of the largest in the world, to be moving mailboxes to production. And that's the way we've kind of measured the fast track methodology, is first mailbox in production on the service. And we've seen a dramatic decline in the time that it takes to do that. And we always go back to our customers and we measure it against the CSAT of others, and we have seen a tremendously higher CSAT, or customer SAT, however you want to say it, when customers are utilizing a defined methodology. So from a scope of work perspective, IT-led migration, you're going to have your own custom domain, your directory synchronization, password sync. Those are all part of what step 2 delivers. And if you need to move forward with ADFS because you have client access policies, or ADFS because you have some specific two-factor authentication you've already deployed, Or maybe you have ADFS because you've already invested in it. Those are the steps that come directly after step 2, where you have federation, hybrid delegation, and more. And we say the and more because it can be all kinds of things. And so what we've seen with our customers over the past couple years is starting with pilots, moving through those scenarios. Some go quickly, some take a little longer. Moving into deployment, being able to go through and do what we call core onboarding, getting your current infrastructure wired up to Office 365 so that you can have the best possible experience with what you have already invested in on premises. And that really is that step 2 model. And step 3 being kind of the advanced side, where maybe you are going to do archiving, DLP, you're going to do a big archiving migration, take all your archives that are somewhere, get them into Exchange Online. That's where we see step 3, and it's always something you can build on. So where to go for information? fasttrack.office.com. Every single step, every single link. Think of this as our UA team, who is the engineering user assistance team, engineering and technical marketing, coming with a place and a guidance and like really a true across-the-board engineering-driven scenario that says, start here, do these steps. We know you'll have an experience that you can expect. Then move to step 2, then move to step 3. It's very simple. There's cartoons on it, but they're good, and they're kind of funny. So, but it does get technical quick, and it links you off to some of the deeper content that you might want as part of that. So to drive a little bit down into the pilot experience, this is basically the steps and the features that are available to you when you're getting started. You use a Cloud ID. Anyone here know what a Cloud ID is? Just a few? All right. You use the really long ID that Microsoft gives you the second that you turn on Office 365. That's a fully valid ID. It has a separate username and password than what you currently do on premises, but it's totally valid. It's perfect for a pilot, and you can start using what we call connected accounts to actually take my name at Microsoft.com and start to send and receive mail from my brand new inbox directly from a connected account. So in a pilot stage, you have not touched any infrastructure whatsoever. You've broken nothing. You've changed nothing. All you're working on is some of the new kind of greenfield side of things that you might do with Office 365, which is really where we see that pilot happening. One of the other things that it does is all of the announcements we've made from an Office perspective. Because Office 365 isn't just Exchange, it is Office. It's Office 365 Pro Plus, it's SharePoint, it's OneDrive for Business, it's Lync. What it allows you to do is have that conversation, and as an IT pro going into the business, someone says, we need cloud, or I heard this thing cloud, or we need something new, or we have Exchange servers that we want to think about what we do next. The other piece is they might have heard of Office on iPad. People might want these experiences of Office. Hopefully they do, because that's why we invest and push them out. So if you're also thinking about, or within your business, thinking about new ways to experience Office, that's all available from a single click, literally, and they're provisioned, and you can then add users who then can take any mobile device, work with Office with no infrastructure changes. Yes, they'll have the Cloud ID to log in with, but it's there. So if you want to try Office on the iPad, if you want to try what OA looks like across all these devices, it's immediately available for you to try out. So don't want to belabor that too much, but we have great experiences from a pilot scenario. And I wanted to talk a little bit about Cloud Identity. It is the very baseline of what you do from an Office 365 perspective. Identity is the number one thing to think about first, because you can't log in to a single service, you can't move a single mailbox, you can't do anything on Office 365 until you have a user that's created. So identity starts at the cloud mailbox, or at the Cloud ID. You have Bob. Bob wants to log into Office 365. The only way that you can get that is Windows Azure AD, Microsoft Azure AD, I believe now, but Windows Azure AD is going to be the source in which we allow that logon to happen. The background of what Office 365 does for authentication is Windows Azure AD. And there's a session right after this one, same room, with Jono Luck, which he is the identity person. So I'm not going to go too deep because he is the guru when it comes to it. But this is where all the authentication is going to happen. So what you have to make sure and do is, Bob, within your corporate network, trying to reach Office 365, he better have something built here that authenticates him. Because that's going to authenticate him and then say, yep, he's available to go into these services. He's available to start utilizing Office 365. The only way to do that is through building him in maybe a CSV import or doing it directly within the admin center. It's very quick to do. It's not what you would do for a 1,000-seat organization, but it's what you do for a pilot. And it's what you do to get started. And yes, you can do CSV imports for many, many people, but this is the getting started way. And so when you import this spreadsheet, which is very simple to use, you can take information out of your AD, put it in the spreadsheet, upload it. It basically then says, yep, Bob is in. We know who he is. He has a license. He can now access the services. And that's cloud identity, and it's very simple to do. And it's what a lot of our small business customers drive off. If you don't have Active Directory in your small business, you can do that. You can do it very easily through CSV. You can do it through the manual adds within the portal. We give that as part of the service 100%. The other thing I wanted to talk about in pilot, and again, we're still in that step one pilot scenario, is we've gone kind of above and beyond from the technical marketing team, and we've taken content, we've taken our best practices, we've taken everything that we've been talking with customers about for the last few years, and we, instead of positioning it in TechNet, instead of positioning it on Office.com, or instead of putting YouTube videos out there, what we've done is we've packaged it into a SharePoint Online site. So you can start Office 365 and have a pre-provisioned SharePoint Online site that basically gives you tools as an IT pro. So project plan, every step-by-step piece that you see on fasttrack.office.com built into a project plan, built into SharePoint tasks. You also get information around change management. What does it really mean to move to the cloud? What are some of the things you need to think about while you're in that pilot stage? Available within SharePoint Online in your own tenant so that you don't have to send people outside of your own tenant. So Fast Track is that methodology, but we're also trying to load in the tools for you to be able to get started with Office 365 quickly. So not only change management and tasks, technical training labs, a lot of the content you see today at MEC happens in our Ignite tour and our Ignite series. And all of that Ignite content, we actually link it all into your SharePoint Online Office 365 tenant, and you have that available to you. So deep training linked directly from your own portal, which you're using to pilot Office 365. And there's also integration with test and exam prep. So labs, what does it look like to do ADFS? What does it look like to do an Exchange migration? You know, we used to send out those 9 DVD packages. Has anyone ever gotten the DVDs? Sat down for 3 days just to unload them on a server that has to have 38 gigs of RAM or whatever it is. So we've built in a lab system to Azure. You bring your Azure subscription. We put in the content. You can then walk through labs. See exactly what it's about. Stop having those DVDs and unpacking. So all of this content is basically part of what Fast Track can enable. The other side of it is also the user side. And we don't want to forget about a pilot is generally you're utilizing Office 365 with some business users. Maybe you only have it for your IT team, but breaking it out into some business users to try to get some buy-in, that's another piece of what a pilot can deliver. So when you think about Office 365 deployment always starts ahead of time. It starts as a service. It starts while you're trying to sell to your business. It starts as when you're trying to talk about what all of this can do to actually change the way you do business. And so what we're trying to do with these scenarios like HR, R&D, sales, we actually position these into your SharePoint Online site, into its own collection called Fast Track, to give you the ideas of how you might change the way you work, all up with Office 365. Maybe you need to learn a little more about it. Maybe you want to see some of the features. Maybe you want to get started. This is basically what I call the model home. We don't want to just give you something empty and say, go for it, build it out, great, good luck. What we want to do is kind of give you this model home that says, here's where the pieces fit. Here's a vision statement, here's the video, here's the getting started guide, and here's the do-it-yourself. So the same thing from a pilot perspective is also with do-it-yourself and videos. So from an end user perspective, even if you, as from an IT side, are looking to deliver Office 365, deliver more than just that mailbox, being able to go through all these within your own tenant, within a pilot. And I'll just put this up so you can take a picture of it. But if you want to start Office 365 today, you can go to aka.ms/getfasttrack, put in the code IMMEC, and you'll get everything I just showed in a tenant, brand new, for 90 days, 250 users. So try it today, do a test run. If you think you're going to go to Office 365, if you're in the planning stages of moving to Office 365, don't use a test domain. Use your real domain, your real how you would want to move forward, because everything I just showed goes directly into production as soon as you're ready. There is no throwaway work. There is no proof of concept. Office 365 is the proven concept, so don't do throwaway work. Don't do POCs. Start with a pilot, and you can move forward very quickly. So this will be in the deck, and it'll be uploaded on the MEC side also. But you'll basically have the way of coming in. You can provision the scenarios you want to, or you can just simply see what Exchange looks like. Work with Exchange online, see what all these new features are about. So I'm going to do a quick demo on that just to show you a little bit where we are. Let me log in. Hopefully. Oh, there it is. Has anyone ever done an Office 365 trial? A few? When you log in, have you ever logged into SharePoint? What did it look like? Blank? Get started? Something? So when you do what I just showed you on the last slide, the minute you get the email that says, "Welcome to Office 365, the first time you log in, we have Getting Started ready. This is your tenant. This is your stuff. No one else can see this. It's part of your Office 365 environment. And what I wanted to show is that it's not just, this is how you right-click in Outlook to do this thing. What we've tried to do is take kind of the vision of how are you going to work different together. You'll see things like store, sync, and share instead of saying a specific product, because Office 365 is more than just one thing. It is a cohesive set of services working together. So when you see the demos from today, when you see demos of the new Office and everything that we do, it comes because SharePoint's there, Exchange is there, Lync is there, Office is there. And so that's your opportunity when you're doing one of these pilots, is to really start from there. So store, sync, and share, I have a vision video, I have the how-tos, I have a click-through. So not only can I see what we want to do, and I'll just go through, showing you how to use OneDrive for Business. I can always download a guide, show it to my end users, get them started. And then we have these click-throughs, which actually allow you to do a step-by-step click-through demonstration. So if your users are wondering how to get started with SkyDrive Pro, which OneDrive for Business will kind of write over this in about a week's time, they can actually walk through and see each step necessary. How do they log in? What is it they're going to do? So getting started with Office 365 deployment really is starting with how is it that you can work different? How is it that you, from an IT pro or IT perspective, drive different activities into the business and a lot of value? I talked about the tasks. Everything on fasttrack.office.com is in here in task guidance, and it's all like I mentioned. You can do it with we can do it with project. You can work through it as a scheduled task list, and it basically just walks you through each of the steps, but in detail. So instead of kind of the light add users, you can actually see how you add a user, how you do the CSV file. It's just helpful and guided. Getting started, I already showed. Keeping everyone on the same page. Stay track and deliver on time. Find the right people. These are all scenarios that utilize all of the pieces of Office 365 to get things done. The other side that I wanted to talk about, and I mentioned, was that model home. So this is the sales and marketing template. We've put in to SharePoint some of the scenarios you might use in a sales and marketing department. Yes, if you have a SharePoint portal right now that spent millions of dollars and tons of people, it's probably a little more advanced than this. But if you don't, or if you've only been doing it for line of business apps and you haven't been doing it for real sharing and collaboration and PowerView and Excel, just use this as some of those guidelines. So you have the same kind of structure, video, vision statement, the things you want to do, but you can always get rid of that. And underlying it is the actual SharePoint site. So showing users how they can actually do this and work through. Visio services, boom, right there. I can drag around, select my leads, see how everything goes. I can work directly into those Office Online. So when you think about PowerPoint and what PowerPoint looks like online, has anyone used this with co-authoring before? So very few. It's here. You start, you can log in and start co-authoring with somebody. You can actually see what it looks like. Why is it important? You see all that document collab that people are doing in the demos this morning? It starts here with being able to edit and save and really use Office right within the browser. And instead of having to build and implement and change infrastructure to get here, it's very easy to just start at this point, see how things work, and then fit it into your business. So that's enough from the pilot side. I'm going to switch back over and talk now about step 2 and deployment. Show of hands, is that helpful? Is everyone logging in right now, hopefully? Going to go home and show your IT colleagues and everyone else what's going on? I hope so, because that's just the methodology is there, 1, 2, and 3, but these are the tools we're trying to position so that at each stage of deployment, you have what's ready and available for you to really have a great experience. So we talked about pilot, which is the first phase. It's the non-infrastructure challenging phase. It's the immediate gratification phase. And once you've moved through that, you're then starting to make some decisions. You're asking yourself, okay, what do my servers look like? What is it that I want to move? What is it that I'm going to actually do with my users when they move to production? How does all that look and feel? Maybe cloud IDs are easy for a few users. They sure get out of hand when I want more users. So from a deployment perspective, the deploy experience, you take everything in pilot and you add on these pieces. Are you coming from Exchange 2003 and Exchange 2007? Perfect. We've got you. We have a plan. We have the way to do it. We have the tools directly from Office 365 to help you move from there. Are you coming from Exchange 2010 mail servers? Even better. They're actually cloud aware. SP3 gives you a configuration wizard that literally allows you to connect yourself to the cloud and have that free busy across both on-premises and cloud. So depending on wherever you're coming from, there's a story, there's a plan, and there's a way to move to Office 365. And it just takes some of those tough questions to say, how much do we want to move? What are we moving from? What is it we're going to do? And with DirSync, and we'll talk about DirSync a little more, you can immediately start DirSyncing. You can start seeing that global address list in the cloud. You can start seeing how DirSync actually creates those users from your AD, moves them out to the cloud, copies them out to the cloud, and allows you to do all your administration from an AD perspective and not have to worry about it in the user interface of the admin portal. And that session right after this one will go way deep into some of those scenarios. So it'll be a great next step for you. It also gets into the client side. Is Office something that you're going to be deploying? Well, we have the IT Pro tools. We have the Office deployment tool. We have the tools to help you position it into SCCM and do pushes. So at this point, this is where the work happens. Step 2 is when you're moving to production, cloud company-wide use. And these are the steps to do it and kind of where you think about where are we in this? Are we ready to do all of these together? Are we going to pick a specific workload? Are we going to worry about mobile clients yet? It's all questions to ask, but the guidance is there, and it's all part of that plan that you build on from Pilot. Pilot had nothing required. Maybe POP and IMAP if you want to do connected accounts, but other than that, there was no requirements for pilots. Windows 7, maybe. But in deployment, you have some requirements. Directory sync, AD needs to meet the service requirements. Same password as on-prem using the Active Directory synchronization, password synchronization. Requirements on your prem about servers, admin access. You can't do anything with these without admin access. And then from a client perspective, it still stays pretty low from the requirements. But this is where the work starts coming. This is where you actually start working through some of the scenarios of verifying your domain. So I talked about that cloud ID, u.microsoftonline.com. That is that cloud ID that then becomes the baseline. But then you don't ever want anyone to see that. That's nothing anyone would ever want to see. You don't want to have to change your email. So the first thing you do when you move into step 2 is you simply verify a domain. And again, this isn't your MX record. This is a CNAME record that's going to let Microsoft know that this is your domain. You can start using it. When you do Active Directory, when it pushes all the information, it'll soft match on everybody you already have in place. So you log in. There's the admin center. You go to the domains. You see that the domains are there. You want to add one. You add a domain. You have to make sure that you select the domain to add it. We're going to send you through this little wizard. The wizard is going to ask you a few questions. It's going to ask you to actually do something on your ISP, unless you have GoDaddy and a couple others that we have automatic configurations. Putting in your domain, and then we want to make sure that you select your preferred instructions. Or from a GoDaddy perspective, we have the APIs and the agreements with them that if you are using GoDaddy, it will actually change that very quickly for you. And again, this isn't affecting mail flow. This is affecting nothing on your on-premises environment. Adding that DNS record, verify the domain, done. It takes 20 minutes. Maybe it takes a little longer for the replication to happen from a question out there. Let's do it. Yeah.
You know, right now there's a limit to how many domains we can have in the queue to verify at one time. I think it's like 50.
Yes.
We can have it in for verification. For a company like our size, where we've got several hundred domains, and
yep.
We're trying to get as many in the queue as possible, and we have to wait for them to be verified, and we have to work with our global representatives to get them all spotted up and
yep.
ready. Is there a way to increase that queue size? It'd be great if we could be working on them all at the same time, and then just mark them off our list as we went, rather than having to wait for 50 to be done before
yep.
we went to the next 50.
That's a great question, and I don't have the answer, but I'll follow up after this with you to increase the queue size of the domains. Perfect. Maybe we ask that in the next session too, but I'll follow up with you directly. That's a great question. So obviously, limitations. Limitations are going to happen. We try our best to document those, but if you're dealing with obviously more than 50 domains, getting through this process is probably a little bumpier than if you have less than 50 domains and can do them all in one queue. But that's a perfect example of, look, the process is to do this. The uniqueness is going to make it either a smoother or a little bumpier ride as you do it. But when you verify the domain, it then becomes you can make it your default domain. One of the main things that you have to do, and that's probably why this gentleman is having issues, is if you're going to do Active Directory, you got to have the domains in Office 365, or the AD sync won't see them and won't be able to then match those people. So it's critical that you verify that domain first, set as your default domain, and then anyone that's being dir synced will soft match to that. So even if I had that on Microsoft.com, I can soft match people. So again, the whole theme of never throwing away or never doing work that's abandoned, that's the critical part. So understanding synchronization, and I'm going to do a high level on this, but hopefully it's enough to give you a really good overview. The next session is the 300 level on just synchronization and password sync and AD. But what is dir sync? Dir sync's an appliance. It's really an application that synchronizes your Active Directory with Office 365. It is not a backup of your AD. It is not replicating it so that your AD is in the cloud. It is not IaaS type of activity for Active Directory. It simply is an appliance. You run it. It's a service. It can sit, I believe we support it on the DC now even, but it literally sits on or off your DC. It runs every 3 hours. It updates, and it means that anytime you do administration in Active Directory, that is then being replicated to the cloud. You can then go in and provision those users from a licensing perspective. But all the groups, all that good stuff comes from Active Directory. It's bundled with SQL Server 2008 R2 Express. if you have more than X amount of objects, I think it's 50,000, but don't quote me on that, or 100,000, then you need to actually use your own SQL instance. It enables coexistence. You can't coexist Exchange on premises and online without DirSync running. It is the prerequisite. And that's why I was saying identity is such a primary piece of what you have to think about first, that getting the identity set up, getting everything going from DirSync is the prerequisite to doing any of the more advanced scenarios that we're going to talk about. And you can read here as far as the experience, global address list. It enables coexistence for all different products. It's not intended as a single-use bulk upload tool. A lot of customers want to just do it once, bulk upload, and then I don't want to DirSync anymore. That's not the recommended approach. The recommended approach would be using a CSV at that point. So DirSync is meant to connect, to replicate, and then to be your source, your primary source from that user creation model. And it enables single sign-on, which is the Active Directory Federation Services side of things. So you have to have DirSync to do ADFS. So it really is the prerequisite to any kind of advanced side of Office 365 that you're going to do. Mailbox-enabled users are synchronized. They're visible in O365 GAL. Regular NT users are synchronized as that. Regular NT users. Synchronized users are not automatically assigned a license. So to the gentleman's point in the back, okay, so then we have to either run PowerShell to assign the license or through the UI assign the license. Because we are not automatically licensing every single person in your GAL. We want to give you the opportunity to do that. But what it's doing is putting them in there from a GAL perspective, and you'll see when we talk about some of the coexistence mail flow why that's important. And you can scope it. You know, a couple years ago, you had to be down at the ILM layer and hacking around at ILM to be able to scope. It was not supported from a Microsoft standpoint. We specifically said scoping's not supported. But now it is, and you can do that directly from DirSync, and it is a supported measure for scoping and filtering. Had a great example the other day of someone who says, well, I have many domains and these whole environments, and I have specific users that have to have very specific needs. Some can move online, some can't. Getting DirSync and scoping it down to the people who you want to go to production, scoping it down to the people that need to be moving forward with Office 365, it helps in the GAL side of things, and it helps in the deployment side of things to be able to scope. And just a pretty picture of scoping. Same thing, DirSync scoping by OU, domain-based user attributes, and just being able to pick those people out. So we've talked a lot about AD. Number one thing of AD is it needs to be remediated. What you've been doing with your AD in the past 10 years, we don't want to know about. We want you to fit with what we do in the cloud. There is obviously work that we need to do to make sure that our cloud AD is not as stringent. So those are something that we think about because we have a very stringent rules and guidance from the cloud AD side and Windows Azure AD. But it's very important that you're able to remediate. And this is something that we've put out a tool called IDFix. And these are some of the things that when I talk about fast track and deployment and putting things in this process, one of the very helpful things is that even from our engineering side, when we're able to go in and say, look, customers are moving through fast track, they're stalling. They're stalling at their AD remediation. They're stalling at being able to fix these things. It makes it a very focused and pointed conversation with engineering to say, you need to uninstall these people with a tool. You need to help us uninstall because people are obviously having trouble from a remediation perspective. And it's really great to be able to go to that engineering table and have them say, absolutely, you're seeing more time for these customers. Let's do something about it. Let's put the investments where we need. That's one of the things with IDFix is we had customers who were going round and round and round, checking log files within Event Viewer of why DirSync was failing. And so what we wanted to do was position a new tool called IDFix so that when you come in with your Active Directory, it's all bad news. IDFix is a very simple tool that basically goes in place, in between. I'll show it to you in a demonstration a little bit. And it just goes through, it makes the changes, but not quite yet, then allows you to see what those changes should be so that you can either make those changes or make the best case change after that. And what that means is it literally took customers who were taking sometimes days, like 5 days to 20 days, trying to remediate their Active Directory. It's probably not anyone's favorite thing to do. It's probably last on our list. It took that down to hours for our customers that said, we now know exactly what we need to do, and I'll show you what it looks like. We know exactly what we need to do. We know who's the people at fault. We know where our process was broken before from a cloud perspective. Let's get that fixed. So IDFix has been a huge tool, and you'll see how simple it is, but it's been great for that.
So if you've done Exchange long enough, you've always seen that there's certain things around aliases, or these characters work here, but these characters don't work there.
Yep.
Are we getting to a point where we have one tool to fix all of the problems?
It's a good question. It's not the one tool to rule them all, but we're working towards it. So I'm gonna just talk a little bit about password sync, and then I'll do a demo and show you what the tools look like. Password synchronization is a feature of Windows Azure Directory Sync. It's an alternative to federated, and we'll talk a little bit about that after we go here. But the benefits are you use a single set of credentials. I like to call it same sign-on instead of single sign-on, but you use same sign-on to be able to deliver end-user experience so that when they log in the cloud, they have their ID, their password from their Active Directory. It's the same sign-on experience. It's fully integrated with the DirSync appliance. And when I mean fully integrated, you'll see what I'm talking about when I do the demo. It is no requirement to do any of ADFS. So it does not require ADFS. Keep the costs down. I mean, that's really what it, speed to implementation, keep the costs down. You can always move to ADFS after you do password sync. It's always a progression, like this whole theme we've been talking about. So get started with this. Hopefully it meets your business needs, and then you simply move forward. It does not require or access the plain text password. And maybe next session I'm going to heckle Jono a little bit about why they called it password sync. But it does not. It's no requirement for reversible encrypted format. It's a hash and is hashed again in a non-reversible encryption function. So I'm not announcing anything, but I like to call it hash sync or something like that because I don't like customers asking me, well, are my passwords in the cloud? Because no, they're not. Passwords are definitely not in the cloud. It's a hash of a hash, and we're just checking back against that hash. It's a one-way synchronization. All of your password complexity requirements then become managed from your perspective. The cloud ones do not come into play. Yours is the master policy. Everything in the cloud is basically then set to never expire because it's being controlled from your perspective. And it's driven by on-premises events. So when people are logged into Office 365, they're not changing their password from Office 365. They're changing it from your AD. You are the master source for that. So what does it look like? Well, this is the familiar picture where we have Bob. Bob wants to log in, and we have the Windows Azure Active Directory here that's going to do the authentication and authorization. And so the next step is, hey, we're trying to authenticate. Bob's logging in. Who is he? Well, based on our Active Directory, which is on our premises, DirSync is synchronizing Bob. So Bob lives here now from a perspective of Windows Azure Active Directory. Oh, it's so easy. I didn't even have another build. DirSync puts it in. Bob then has the ability to log into where he is licensed. So authentication happens from Windows Azure Active Directory. Authorization then happens from within the service. All you have to have on premises is that DirSync appliance running and updating as it goes. So we're just going to jump over to a demo. There we go. Hopefully everyone can see that. I'll try to zoom it as we go. So this is my kind of hosted, replicated data center. I have ADFS, I have my client machines, my DC, my DirSync machine, all my Exchange environment, et cetera. We're going to specifically focus on DirSync and on what we need to do from an IDFix perspective. So when I look at ID Fix, it's something I've downloaded and I have available to me right there. ID Fix sitting on the desktop as a link. And when I click on it, it's going to take a second as I click here. It's going to ask me, hey, ID Fix applies only for this privacy statement, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to query against my Active Directory. You can see it's very simple. This is ID Fix. This is showing me exactly what's going to fail when I DirSync. So it's showing me what's going to fail. It's showing me why it's going to fail. It gives me the opportunity to update, take the action of edit to remove it, or it's complete. I could edit these. I could remove them. I can see that some of them are .local. Some of them have those character values. Very simple. Go through, make the changes. Once I make the changes and apply, what you'll see has happened is on the desktop, it made a backup. I can revert. I can always hit the undo button. So if I applied something and then I get a call from someone and says, hey, I can't log into my email, and it's because they had an apostrophe or something in the wrong place, you can immediately revert that back. So we always give the opportunity to make the change on AD. It could be a big change sometimes, but you can always revert back. And you can do that, everyone's favorite button, undo. Don't do that again. So ID Fix, very simple, but very powerful, because you would have had to parse through Event Viewer logs after DirSync failed, after all the work you did to try to get things running, to then go back and try to fix all these users instead of doing it up front. So very simply, seeing everything that you might need to change, and again, there might be some work you need to do in the background, but sometimes we just see simple things that throw off DirSync and throw our customers off that we want to help remediate immediately. So once I'm remediated, I'm going to run DirSync, but first I'm going to show you the portal. I'm in the admin center. All my services are online. Thank goodness. Everything's green. When I go into users and groups, you'll see that I have just a couple of users. I've built them manually. They have those long on Microsoft.com names. It's perfectly fine. I haven't actually validated domain on this tenant yet, but I could add a user here. I could bulk add a user. It's very simple. This is what I'm talking about with when you're piloting. You can just start adding some users, adding some context to that. But also what you see is my Active Directory synchronization right there kind of in the middle. It says deactivate. It's because it's running. The service is now listening for my Active Directory sync. And so where you see deactivate, that usually says activate. You turn it on, and now it's listening. So I have to do that first. Have to activate that. Then I grab the DirSync, do ID Fix, and then start with DirSync. And what you'll see is that the first time I run through, it's a wizard. Pretty simple. It's asking me my Windows Azure Active Directory, and it's admin at, if I can type correctly. So all I've done is put in my cloud credentials. With my cloud credentials in, it's going to make sure that I am authorized to do this from the cloud perspective. It's going to take just a minute, and it will pass me through. Now it's going to ask me for my Active Directory creds. So I've just put in my corporate Active Directory creds. This is what's going to look into the DC, get me going. If I have, and I have an Exchange 2013, if I have Exchange 2010 SP3 or Exchange 2013, the wizard actually knows that, sees that I have that schema, and says, do you want to enable that hybrid deployment? That's only if you're going to be doing hybrid, because Windows Azure AD actually does a few write-backs when you're doing hybrid. So I'm sure they'll talk about it in some of the following deeper sessions, but that's the ability to do write-back from the cloud when you're in a hybrid, rich hybrid environment. I'm not going to select that now. And so all of that talk about password sync, fully integrated into DirSync, it's a checkbox. That's it. So you check the box, you have DirSync with password sync. Your users then have a single, same sign-on experience when they're utilizing Office 365. And you didn't have to build any infrastructure to do it. You didn't have to add infrastructure for ADFS. You didn't have to deploy proxies and ADFS servers and geo-redundant locations because you were becoming the single source of failure for Office 365. That's the ADFS world. In this world, you're getting same sign-on, your ability to move very quickly, and it simply is that checkbox, fully integrated. Configuring, it's getting ready to do its thing. And then it's going to tell me, are you sure you really want to do this right now? Absolutely. Let's do it. It's going to take a minute. And you do run into some time frame values here when it comes to moving hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands, or syncing tens of thousands of people. It takes time, and it's not actually syncing right now. It's just getting ready to do that sync. But we have very specific guidance on TechNet and within the fast track documentation, which states how long it takes for that first sync. Every other sync after that is just incremental. It's very quick. It runs every 3 hours. You don't have to worry about it. So configuration's complete. Synchronized directories now. Done. So now this service is running, and it will continue to run. You can reboot the server, and it will continue to run. And this is just that little appliance that's feeding those into the cloud. What you'll notice is, if I go into my admin center, no one's there yet. It takes a little time. So the first time you see it, you might be thinking, well, I wonder what's going on here. It actually takes a little time. So I'm going to go through some of the rest of my presentation, and then we'll get back to this. And then it will magically appear. So we've talked about Pilot. We've talked about identity and how important that is. We've talked about DirSync, all these steps. We're still in the blue step 2 mode. That's why I always theme my slides. We're in blue. It's step 2, and we want to understand coexistence. What is coexistence when we speak about coexistence? It means some of your users are on-prem. Some of your users are online. Simple as that. There's different ways of doing coexistence. Rich, simple, those kind of things. But coexistence simply means you have an island on your premises, you have an island in the cloud, and those two groups of users can experience, will have a different experience, really. Office 365 uses the same objects in the GAL. Email messages are routed seamlessly from Office 365 users to the on-premise users and vice versa. So when you think about simple coexistence, it uses the directory synchronization, it uses the GAL synchronization to be able to then tell Exchange online, Exchange on-prem, how to communicate together. Where does that mail flow? Where does it route? How does it all go and happen? And that's the magic of the DirSync. So basically, users, groups, and contacts flow from your on-prem to online. Mailbox data via Outlook Anywhere, RPC over HTTP, when you're doing a migration scenario, comes from your premises to online. What does it look like? Let's walk through the day in the life of a pre-coexistence mail routing. So you have your user object, John Doe. Someone emails John Doe. It flows down the MX record, goes to the Exchange server. Exchange server says, oh, I know who that is. Boom, deliver that mail. So simple mail routing, pre-coexistence. When you want to mail route from on-prem to 365, you have Exchange, you have 365. Your MX record is still pointing on premises. You don't change that MX record till the end. So your MX record, while you have that server down there, is still going through. So what it's going to do is it's going to flow over, and it's going to go into the Exchange, and it's going to look for John Doe. John Doe isn't on premises, but he has an SMTP, the target address, that says, oh, send it here. This is where it needs to go. It then flows through the Office 365 MX record, finds that user in Office 365, there's that address, delivers the mail. So very simple mail flow going through from there. Now, mail routing from someone who's internal to the organization, connected to your Exchange, it moves to the Exchange. Instead of coming down the MX record, the Exchange sees the same thing, sees John Doe, sees that target address, and sends it on its way. So to end users, they're simply emailing John. They have no idea where his mailbox lives. They don't really care. They're just emailing. Now, when you look at and then it hits him, goes to his mailbox. Now, from Office 365 to on-prem, same kind of scenario. You have these two users, Jane Doe on-prem, and you have Jane Doe who's out online. DirSync, someone an online here, so that's how it goes, sorry. Jane Doe's on-prem. But in the online, because of DirSync, all of this information resides in Office 365. So when John sends a mail, it actually finds her in Exchange Online, but Exchange Online knows that Jane Doe needs to go to this target address, and it goes outside through the normal MX record into Exchange, into Jane Doe, lands in her mailbox. So you can imagine when you have your email open and you see Jane Doe, and Jane Doe is not, you don't know that, but she's not on-prem, but you are. I mean, it does look a little different. If you right-click and go into the attributes, it does look like those mails were coming from someone outside your organization. It doesn't feel like that, but from an admin perspective, you'll also see that, because it is. It's going out, coming in. The target addresses are used, so they actually look and feel from a technical level like it's outside the org. To an end user, it's their same exact gal, it's the same distribution groups, it's everything the same, and they really don't notice that. So from a mail flow, you get coexistence ready to go. You did your DirSync with password sync. Coexistence is in now. You're ready to start thinking about migrate options. And again, there are 2010 SP3, 2013. You see them on the migration options, but they're under the term hybrid. So we can start with PST migration, PST import tools, being able to take all those PSTs that are floating around in your environment, move them into Office 365. IMAP migration. Maybe you're coming from a different technology. Maybe you're coming from a competitor. We utilize IMAP as that least common denominator that says, we know we'll get all your mail. We know we can get to IMAP. We have the tools to do it built into Office 365. It supports a huge range, but then again, email only, no calendar contacts or tasks. Being very specific about that. If it's something you need from IMAP and you need more than that, we typically work across a bunch of different partners and third-party ISVs who have built tools around those scenarios. The built-in process for Office 365 will grab mail only.
How does the coexistence model compare to hybrid?
I think we're going to talk about that in just a minute. So, yeah, I think you saw my slides yesterday and you preambled. No, we'll talk about it in just a minute. So, you then have the stage exchange migration where you're taking batches. It requires no infrastructure. So you currently have 2003 or 7. You're not having to put anything else on premises to be able to migrate. You're using the tools from the admin center, and the admin center is then batching, connecting back into your exchange, and then working directly through those batches. Hybrid does get different. Hybrid is very different. Hybrid is the ability to truly have cloud integration. So if you're on 2010 SP3 and above, if you're on Exchange 2013, those products were built with the cloud in mind. 2003 and 7, there was no cloud. Those were the cloud at the time. But 2010 and 13 were built with Office 365 in mind. So what you'll see from a range of things that change when you do hybrid. Simple coexistence, like I was just talking about, and simple migration. Your two islands, anyone who moves from this island to that island, you don't see free busy. You want to schedule a meeting with them, send them an IM and say, hey, when are you free? But if you're doing hybrid, you're getting free busy across that chasm. You're having your Exchange 2010, your 2013, truly communicating with the cloud in a very rich way. But the fact of the matter is, how many of our customers are on SP3? How many are on 2013? We need to give as great of experiences as we can for that 2003 and 7 crowd moving to the cloud. But there are 3 other sessions about hybrid, specifically about hybrid, that I link in the back of this. Because it makes everything look the same. You can manage it from your Exchange Management Console. It's basically just saying, hey, this is here. It's just all one spot. So It is very much from a, if you have those investments in place, it makes it very easy to be able to migrate and move, and it becomes truly a mailbox move. You don't have to download OSTs. That doesn't happen. So that's where you move from that staged migration into hybrid capabilities. You had a question?
Actually, two. One is, and you might get to it, if you're doing ADFS Federation, do you still use DirSync to get the data?
DirSync's a prerequisite. Yep,
DirSync is a prerequisite for the ADFS.
it is.
And the second question was, you mentioned a 3-hour.
Yep,
I don't know if that's configurable or not, but
it's configurable.
as far as password changes on-prem,
Password changes are, hash changes are immediate. The sync of just the user data schema stuff, that's every 3 hours. It's configurable. So 2 good questions. You can configure DirSync to be able to fit it to your needs. The password changes are as soon as those password changes are made. I'm going to take your question in just a minute because I just wanted to talk a little bit about this, and then we'll get to there. Stage exchange migration, the benefits are you don't have to build anything new to do this. Office 365 consumes it. It's part of how we've built the service, is to be able to take in 2003 and 7 so that you don't have to continue to build infrastructure just to get to the cloud. If the cloud is where you're moving and you don't have 2010 or 13, you can do that through the tools you already have today. The user experience, and I already hit on some of these, but the user experience is they're downloading an OST. They see this as a migration. Data is being moved, cutovers are happening. These are more of kind of the big bet sides that you got to make sure you're communicating against because this is a move. People will know they're moving to Office 365. When you were running in a 2013 or 10 hybrid, they might not know. They might have no clue. They're not having to re-download OSTs. They're not having to change profiles. But when you're in a stage migration, it's very quick. It's very less expensive from a time and effort perspective when you think about it. But it is that kind of cutover scenario. And when you think of the data migration scope, no folder exclusion, no time range selection, you're taking everything in that mailbox. So whatever's there, boom, it's grabbing it. Mailboxes enabled for unified messaging cannot be migrated. Hidden mailboxes cannot. New cloud mailboxes created, and it is a new GUID. And you can imagine what happens when there's a new GUID. That means the new OST, existing cache mode and stuff cannot be preserved. So from a scope, because we want to be very clear and scoped about this and let people know exactly what happens, everything that's migrated, everything that's not. So if you have people with 10,000 emails in the dumpster, those aren't coming with them. And the reason why we have the messages larger than 25 is because we don't support that in Office 365. 30 is really the top line, but we only will move something that's 80% of that. So 25 meg files will get left behind. Hybrid. I have one slide on hybrid, which is pretty worthless at this point for me to talk hybrid on one slide. And there's all these awesome other places to go. So tomorrow, on Tuesday, there's hybrid. Wednesday, there's 3 different hybrid. And then next here is the Active Directory, Windows Azure Active Directory talk with Jono. So write these down, check them out. All I did was search through my mech for hybrid. These all pop up. These are all 300 level or more, I believe. And we'll get into a lot of the configuration and scenarios for hybrid. I wanted to show that kind of step all the way up to there. And if hybrid is the plan, that's step 3, enhance. That's hybrid. So we went through everything here, step 1 and step 2 today in the getting started with Office 365 deployment. Just as my final kicker. Ta-da, all my users in the cloud. DirSync, yay, it all worked. So I mean, it's all there now, and I can then license everybody. It says what they're synced with Active Directory. All of my GAL, my information, everything is now being able to be in coexistence. I could start my stage migration immediately from here. So start licensing, start stage migration, and then be done from that perspective of the step 1 and into 2 model. So again, I belabored the point early, but the message is clear. The message is start simple, whatever that means to your business. Start simple, move to complex, build in the layers of complexity as you need, because the service is running, it's ready for you. We have capacity, and I gave you all a free trial. So start using it, check it out, become an evangelist internally about everything that can happen here, because it is more than just Exchange. We have such a great opportunity from an all-up office perspective to really drive new ways of working with people. So hopefully that helped. Hopefully that's the getting started you were looking for. Those hybrid sessions, this next session in here today will go really deep on some of these topics. So thank you very much, everybody. Really appreciate the time. Thank you.